Smoky on the way. There's a Smoky 2 exits up. Yes. Yeah.
Good morning at last. I see Laura, I see Tom, are you here?
Looks like he's working on it.
I see John.
I'm here.
Herbert?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I'm trying to get the video going. I don't know why.
Well, we look the same as we did yesterday, so don't worry about that.
All right. Interesting.
I think it turned you off unless you turn it on, specifically with this one.
Yeah. Video settings.
There's a, if you look down by where the microphone, if you're using a PC, it's down to the right of where the microphone. There's a microphone on the left and to the right of it. There's a camera that's probably just closed off.
No, I've
there you go.
Hey, now we got you.
Good. Good.
Let me. I'm just going to send an email to Tom to remind him that he can phone in.
It would appear he's on and hearing us, though.
Okay.
He just doesn't have his mic on. There
we go. Finally. So everybody could ignore the email I just sent out.
Oh, okay.
What a hassle. We went through this Tuesday with the Open Space Committee and had to cancel it because just nobody could do it.
Okay.
Anyway.
Well, let me just call the roll to be sure we're all here. Tom, I can hear you and see you. Laura?
Yes.
Herb?
Yes.
John?
All right.
Hiding in the shadows.
Okay. I think that's everybody. Let's it says I'm the host now. That's a waste of time. Let me start with the ponds meeting. We had two of them, one with the Cape Cod National Seashore and the other with Suzanne Thomas. Laura has given us some very good minutes from that. I'll just make a few comments of my own about the meeting with the seashore. I was pleased to hear that they consider our ponds compared to the rest of the Cape to be in pretty good shape. I found, I guess for very good reasons, the rest of the meeting didn't clarify what an action plan would be. The temperature rise in the ponds is ongoing, but we can't control that. I had hoped that we might see some preference for nitrogen contamination as opposed to phosphorus contamination. That there seems to be no balance in that. We've got to consider both of them. I tried to understand whether we had to pay more attention to people who live near the shore of a pond rather than further upstream. It appears we have to consider all of the above. And in general, pretty complicated. Does anyone else have another point of view? It was a very good meeting. I'm not in anyone. You know, if it's complicated, it's complicated. That's nothing to do with Sophia's good summaries. Any other comments?
To add to the complication, Sophia did emphasize that it's very difficult to talk about the ponds because each pond is unique.
Right.
And that's going to also complicate the plan going forward. And it's certainly accurate. Over the years, the seashore has debated among themselves whether nitrogen or phosphates are the critical tipping element. They've issued papers on that, and we can get them. I think they tend now to lean towards nitrates, but part of the difference is that nitrogen will be absorbed over time by plants and others, and phosphates, once there, are there forever. So that part of the takeaway from me is, having watched this over many years, is the reduction in the budgets, the National Seashore. They're in past years, I'm going back 10, 20 years, there was never a question about there being sufficient funds in the budget to do annual testing. And I think one of the elements we have to consider in our plan now is the message, the lack of testing in the past couple of years, and the message that came through that the funds may not be there in the future for annual testing of the ponds, regular annual testing of the ponds. I think that's going to have to play into our planning.
I think to that point, Herb, I think we need to write a harbor plan, get it approved, but within that, and then go to town meeting for some help, as we just did with the harbor plan.
Yes.
So
I think the meeting also pointed out the need to monitor invasive plants, or to react towards invasive plants.
right.
What did you have from that?
Frankly, I thought that was a bit more manageable. I thought they were sort of ahead of the game on that. I say funding, we have to go to town meeting. I think we have to start looking for some external grants as well.
Yeah.
To support the town's work. Does anyone else have a thought on the meeting with the seashore, Sophia and Greg?
You've covered it pretty well for the high points.
As I say, it's complicated because it's complicated. I was hoping for some clarity.
It's unfortunate the data is being re-scrubbed and won't be available until 23. That doesn't help us any in the effort, but
right.
It is what it is.
Herb, when you do your testing, are you still doing Secchi disc?
No, we're only doing we say it's Gupaka is doing it, doing the water collection on behalf of the town for the APCC testing of cyanobacteria.
Okay.
That's the only testing that we're doing.
Okay.
I still have all the equipment you gave me, John, that's still in my shed, but no, we're strictly doing the cyanobacteria testing. which includes, by the way, taking the water temperature and air temperature in each of the
Right.
ponds at the shoreline.
One of the things your good comment that one of the things that Sophia discussed was the fact that each pond is different. And I thought we ought to, I was trying to think of some sort of simple mechanism at which we could prioritize the ponds, because for a more detailed study. And one of the fairly simple things which always appeals to me is water quality, which is what Secchi depth gives us. Does everyone know what a Secchi depth is?
No.
A disc, yeah.
What you do is you take a disc about a foot in diameter, weighted so it'll sink with a cord attached, and it's painted in black and white. Two black quadrants, two white quadrants, and then you let it sink down, and the cord you let it sink down with is marked with foot markers, and when you can't see it, that's the Secchi depth. So it's a measure of water clarity going straight down. And as I remember, a pond like Duck Pond is very clear. I remember numbers in the range of 50 or 60 feet. I don't know if that's still the case. Some of the other ponds are shorter, less deep, but it's a measurement of water quality. It's something that's easy to take and easy to understand.
How do you spell that, John?
Secchi is how I spell it. Whether that's correct or not, I'm not sure.
That's right.
You know, the ponds are, each pond has been classified at one point or another on the eutrophic scale. There's 3 levels of pond health: oligotrophic, mesotrophic, and eutrophic.
Mm-hmm.
Being from pristine down to on a way to becoming a field, which is eutrophic. And there's a number of criteria that go into those classifications. And one is a Secchi depth, but there's also dissolved oxygen, phytoplankton abundance, nitrogen, phosphorus, aquatic vegetation. Those are all those have been defined as indicators of the health of a pond. Secchi depth, John, is one. I think another critical indicator is water temperature and oxygen content of the water. You know, really what we're interested in is what are the indicators of a growing problem in a pond? We're looking for the canary in the mine shaft.
What were the 3? There was Secchi depth, water temperature, and what was the third?
Dissolved oxygen. To me, would be the 3 critical ones.
Herb, have you had any contact with APCC about ponds issues?
Not beyond
The testing.
Not beyond testing. I'm blanking on the name. Who's got the name of the director of?
Joanne?
No, the technical person I usually talk to is Joanne Miramoto, but she's not the director.
Yeah, the director's come up, a very nice guy. Has addressed our group twice, once in person and once over Zoom. But it's always been just in relation to cyanobacteria.
Okay.
Yes, we could definitely reach out to him.
I think it'd be interesting to have the same conversation with APCC as we had with the seashore. It would just help the thinking to hear 2 points of view on what's obviously a very difficult issue. So as I said, the technical person I usually talk to is Joanne. I'll go to her and see whether APCC are interested in who the right contact people there are.
Okay. Yeah, we're Laura and I went back and forth over this one last time, is what we should do next. And maybe this is the time to discuss that. We thought that the next step in this ponds management plan would be to to identify critical data we have to determine. And I can give you the list of them. It's what we're on now is what we first thought, that we need to finalize the list of critical water quality indicators. That would be our next step.
Okay.
Then create a list of critical invasive plants and where they currently are located. Third was determine the current Massachusetts and town statutes on septic upgrades. And the fourth was create a list of the most at-risk access points to the ponds. Fifth was review the town and seashore records for any studies on pond fish and amphibians. And then last was make a list of derelict properties on land near the ponds.
Are there any?
Laura?
Yes, there are. There's 3 of them on Long Pond, 2 of which are pretty close to water.
Oh, okay.
And they've been sitting there for 20 plus years, getting worse and worse.
Party Central or?
There have been periodic times where people have found them, but for the most part,
Yeah.
left alone. I mean, I get it. The park doesn't have the money to take them down, but
Yeah.
I thought that's a good list. The one thing is about the septic upgrade. I asked Sophia some questions which I thought would lead to that as an answer. And the response I thought I heard was, well, not only is each pond different, but it's complicated and you have to look at the flows which come in not only from the septics and buildings near the pond shore, but further upstream. So I had the impression, for example, if you had some contaminant that reached the water table, let's say between Duck and Gull, that would be deeper than a septic, and you had to consider that as well. You know, when I talk about complication, that's what I heard, and that's why I'd like to go talk to somebody else and test that idea. Maybe I heard it wrong. It's quite possible.
I haven't heard that come up often. Many, many years ago, John Portnoy had a little device that he dragged behind a boat around the ponds.
Yeah.
Called a scooper, a snooper Cooper, something like that. But it was to search for plumes coming out in front of properties. I don't know whether that piece of equipment exists anymore. I'd like to reach out to John informally and ask him about that.
Please do that. He's another, he did a lot of work on ponds before he got pretty much involved just in herring rivers. And so that, yeah, he has a lot of good knowledge.
Super Snooper, it was called.
Okay.
But I think what we, in short, what I was saying is I think we need to really identify the data, pull together that data on that list and clarify it. What are the critical indicators throughout? And I believe that'll drive the plan.
I've got one that I could, when it comes to fish and amphibians,
yes.
Because, well, with Gull Pond, it's a put and take with the trout, but because there's been mercury warnings for eating the fish in most of the ponds in Wellfleet, I don't know if it's all of them, but it is Gull Pond, but there's a warning about mercury levels in fish. I think somebody should actually sample the fish and see if that's true or if it's not true. And it's going to involve getting fishermen to be a part of this. So that would be interesting to know, because that's, when you think about mercury contamination, I don't know if this is a common problem across the country or if it's strictly I don't think there's anybody dropping mercury in the ponds. It's an atmospheric thing as far as I remember, but it would be nice to know what the levels are and if this is actually true. And if it's not, I think we ought to try to figure out a way to remove the mercury warnings for fish.
I think the problem, John, is it goes back to acid rain and that it came from like
atmosphere, yeah.
Yeah, and it got a good chunk of New England when it dropped, and it's heavy, so it goes to the bottom of the ponds and sits there, and that's why the fish get contaminated with it.
Well, I heard that. What I heard, John, was that the fish are being delivered to the ponds now, and they're being fished for. But people don't eat them, or what's the deal?
People do eat them. I don't. Most of the people that I know in Wellfleet prefer saltwater fish, but people do eat them. The trout would not be, because that's a put and take fishery where they don't live in the ponds, I don't think, for any great period of time. I'd be curious to know what the year-round population is. I've never heard of any really big trout that have been living there for years being caught. So I could be wrong. They could be hanging out in the middle of the pond somewhere where nobody catches them. But they're stocked in Gull Pond, but that's it, as far as I know in Wellfleet. That's the only place they stock them. I'm thinking about bass and pickerel. Some people eat largemouth bass, but those fish are, Higgins Pond's full of largemouth bass. I know people have fished for them. And, that would be an interesting thing to know is if there's a mercury warning on eating fish that are that live there year round, it would be nice to know if there is actually mercury in these fish or if this is kind of a bunch of hype that's been over the years because of acid rain or the atmosphere, that it's true. I mean, it would be nice to know. And that would be something that could engage the public and catch the fish, sample the fish. It would involve catching and killing a few fish, but it would be interesting to know.
One thing one little thought I had, which could be also about fish, a little bit encouraging, is I think if you look about the last 5 years of our herring count data, it's relatively stronger than the first 5 years. And that suggests that the water quality, at least in terms of the production of herring, has been moderated. Let's put it that way. And of course, that may not be just in the ponds. That could be anywhere up and down the.
Yeah, that could be a direct reflection of the fact that these midwater trawlers have been pushed off the coast by about 30 miles now. So that could be. It'd be interesting to know if year by year we start seeing more herring now that midwater trawler ban has been put into effect. If in fact we are seeing more river herring come up.
Another thing we could do is propose that we trap a few of the exiting young of the year and see what mercury levels they have. I mean, they're in the water for all their life.
The herring.
Yeah, right. The young herring.
Huh.
I take John's suggestion. At this point, I think we should just add mercury to one of the critical items to be checked.
Yeah, it's a scary. People hear about mercury, they kind of freak out. So
there is some. I have heard debate in the within the seashore community about stocking the ponds. Only Gull Pond is stocked.
Correct.
It is stocked by this. It is stocked by the state, and in discussions with the seashore over the years, it's been mentioned to me several times that the state is stocking the ponds with a non-native fish. So
that is true.
Yeah. So we'll see. Well, for today's discussion, I think we should just add it to the list of critical items to be checked. Okay.
We move on to the discussion that you had with Suzanne, and then come back to the next steps. Excellent notes from Laura.
Yeah.
Is there anything that Laura, you or Herb would like to add to this?
Well, Herb and I went through them and summarized it, so it's a joint effort. But she echoed a lot of what the park said. Concern about shoreline, highlights in terms of what they're thinking of doing at a few ponds going forward. Noteworthy that may bring lifeguard back to a couple ponds, which would be good on a number of fronts. But the notes pretty well cap it.
But a couple things one thing that struck me on the lifeguards is I've mentioned that to my wife and a couple other people that Suzanne wants to bring back lifeguards to Gull Pond and Long Pond. And their reaction so far has been, wait, you mean there aren't lifeguards there now?
I can't remember the last time I saw one at Long Pond. So.
Yeah, I don't want to jump ahead in what our recommendations are going to be, but that seems to be, talk about low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, that's an easy one.
Wanted them not only for the safety, but she believes that if there is a town of Wellfleet lifeguard there present, people will behave themselves better coming down the paths, stay on the staircases, not abuse the banks. So it's both for protect the natural resources and the people. And the other thing that struck me in our discussion with Suzanne was I was pleasantly surprised on the level of cooperation she described between the town and the National Seashore. I was not aware that there was a functioning ad hoc committee between the town and the seashore. And that she described regular contact through emails and through these meetings.
That's good to hear.
I think one thing we'll have to consider in our plan, and at this point I'm saying consider, is recommending whether or not this be formalized. Right now it's very ad hoc.
You and I also talked, Herb, about how we might be able to get citizen action to help all of it too as part of our thought process, just like you've done with the Gupaka testing for the APC's cyanobacteria.
There was the only thing in all of what you guys said that surprised me was about Duck Pond, because I had been to Duck Pond, June-ish, which was certainly not yet the height of summer, but I thought it was actually in pretty good shape. And obviously, as the summer wore on, that became more and more of a problem. One thing I found useful when we were doing the first ponds plan was to talk to some of the people who live along the ponds And there's only one family at Duck Pond who I talked to, and I think Herb knows, and whose name I've again forgotten, but it might be very useful to hear their comments. Laura's in a position to talk about Long Pond and Herb about Gull. But they have their view about use and overuse might provide some additional depth to our understanding.
Yes, it's the Garrison family. They've owned it for generations. The eldest brother now is Dave Garrison. And I've spoken to Dave on the phone several times. And I spoke to Frank in person 2 weeks ago when I was there doing the collections. And yes, I can definitely follow up on that. It's anecdotal. David feels strongly that there is a reduction in clarity in the pond as the summer goes on. So that might be something to follow up on.
I'd be particularly, well, first of all, I hope they would be willing to join one of our meetings. And I'd be particularly interested, Herb, in their view about the nature of crowding at Duck Pond, either at the beach itself or elsewhere along the pond. When I was there, the beach was fairly busy. Kids were enjoying themselves. People were behaving themselves. I mean, this was the middle of an afternoon. It wasn't, and it was early in the summer. So I may have to revise my opinion there. I know that Duck Pond is extremely fragile because it's so clear. It doesn't take much to make it unclear.
Yeah.
Any other comments about the ponds?
Well, I think it would be helpful to Lauren and I to know whether we're in agreement that the next step should be gathering the data that in that list of 6 items that we sent to you. You may want to think about it and come back on that, but
no, I'm fine with that, Herb. I think you and Laura have been sending out a draft of what a ponds plan would contain, and so we haven't reviewed that yet at this meeting, and I'd like to do that the next time. So please make sure that those 6 items are highlighted there if they aren't already. I guess the other 2 things I would suggest, Herb and Laura, we follow up on. I'll follow up with APCC. And Herb and Laura, if you could think about some people who live on the ponds and who would be honest brokers.
That last one was a killer.
Yeah.
My experience in many years in dealing with the folks who live in the ponds is we tend to have very strong response to singular events or singular experiences. And it's, yes, if we do talk to people, we just have to bear in mind that it's anecdotal. In most cases.
But for people who've been around a long time, they can tell you what species were there 50,
yes,
40 years ago that aren't now. And I mean, we may be able to collect some little interesting information.
Yeah.
One of the examples I'd like to know if the situation at Duck Pond today is the same as it was 10 years ago, or is the amount of use getting worse? amount of abuse getting worse.
Okay, we can do that. We had an interesting discussion in our little group, Kupaka, before my last meeting, in how much do we involve people from Truro? And one of the wiser board members said to me, no, we're interested in not in the jurisdictic lines, town lines, but in the scientific, geological, whatever you call it, geographic distribution of the ponds, and pointed out that Slough Pond and Horseleech Pond are just all are very much a part of this group of ponds,
right?
Wellfleet. And one of the questions that I have always in my mind is, do we reach out and try and get some understanding of what's going on in Slough Pond and Horseleech Pond as indicators of what is occurring in Wellfleet ponds? Those two ponds, I don't know if anybody's familiar with that neck of the woods. They're, hundreds of yards away from the Wellfleet ponds. They're very close. You can almost portage from Williams to Slough. And I just don't know whether we have to take some look at what's going on there as a reflection back on Wellfleet. There's nothing south of us, I don't think, in Eastham that's like that.
Eastham is a totally
different
because their ponds are not in the seashore.
Yeah.
You don't want to complicate your life too much, but it certainly makes sense.
They don't appear to have as much activity on them as some of ours.
No.
So it would be an interesting comparison in that sense.
Yeah, I think we have in Kupaka, I just know them from names. I think I may have met them, but I don't know otherwise. But it seems to be from Slough Pond. I think we have 3 people who are somewhat active that I can reach out to. I think I'll do that and just at least get something anecdotal from them.
Well, the other thing is, I know the person in Truro who's the equivalent of Hillary here. Her last name is Beebe, and I don't do names so well anymore, but I know her, and so I can contact her and ask her about those ponds, what data she receives from the seashore, how much use they get. I think that would be that. I had heard from John Portnoy that they're a lot better shape than ours because they get a lot less use, fewer people live around them. But it'd be interesting to, I think that sort of a control would be very useful.
It's Jacqueline Beebe.
Jackie Beebe, right.
And she had been in Wellfleet before. So that...
Yes, she had Hillary's position before Hillary, and then she went off and did some other things. And
you mean Emily Beebe?
What?
Do you mean Emily Beebe?
Emily Beebe, right. No.
Yeah, the health agent.
Who?
She used to be our health agent.
Yeah, it's Emily Beebe.
Yes.
Oh, Emily, sorry.
The other Beebe was on the Board of Selectmen. That way. Anyhow, I know her, and I'll look up the name to be sure I've got the right one. But I think that could be useful. Any other comments on ponds?
Well, just if you clarify, what are you looking for from Laura and I for the next meeting, our next step?
We're going to spend time on the plan.
Okay.
You started to outline a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in that email. Our latest.
It's in the email. I'd now like.
Okay.
Let's put some concrete around it now. We have not talked about it in the meeting yet.
Good. Okay. Good.
Has everyone seen the first ponds plan?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Keep it right next to my bed all the time.
I'm pleased to hear that.
Better.
Okay, let's, it's a great start. Got a lot to, sort of doing what I think is appropriate, getting a broad picture, and we'll have to focus it down as we move along, but that's in the future. We have a couple of votes coming up about annual town meeting articles. The Board of Selectmen are meeting on Tuesday, and they would like us to reapply for the Curley Report article, which was pulled from the ATM warrant at the last meeting because there wasn't sufficient funding. There are two issues. One is our summary of intent, and the thing that I had added there from what we had proposed last June is that we would include we would include if I can find the word, the concept of a bottom to top plan that includes phytoplankton and harbor grasses at the base and works its way up to the large finfish and shellfish, who are the ultimate consumers of materials which start at phytoplankton and harbor grasses. So that's a proposal for a slightly different shift. The other question, once we've agreed on the summary language, is a question of how the town would fund it and the consequences of that. So first of all, are we agreed or disagreed about the revised summary of intent, the somewhat broader summary of intent that includes the base of the food chain?
Is that going to add more cost to the project, John? Or
yes, somewhat. But I don't want to change the cost. We'll just have to figure a way to fit it in.
Yeah.
It probably means fewer samples, but a little more detail in each sample.
Are we still asking for $60,000? Was that right?
Yes.
And what do you think the temperature is with the town for funding at this point?
That's the next question. The chairman of the select board, Ryan, well, let's talk about that issue. There are several questions. One is, do we want this to be at the December town meeting or next April's? And the advantage of being on the December town meeting is if it gets approved as we get started earlier. If it goes on the April town meeting with a early June vote, it's going to be very hard to get started before the end of summer. If we are on the December town meeting with, I assume, a December vote, and I have to confirm that, we get started, we can get a running start next year.
My recollection from the Curley report is they started in September. Not maybe that was an arbitrary date, I don't know, but it's, because it's a 12-month study, I don't know that it matters when you start, whether it's in the spring. I would think the fall would probably be better once things calm down and they've got their testing protocols down, whatever they're doing.
Okay.
Well, for one thing, the town's finances are still apparently in total disarray. But if we wait until the spring, then we'll be again on the agenda with several other requests. I'm not sure how many more will be on the warrant for December, but it might be, I'm just wondering if it might be easier to get it through if we put it on in December than wait until we're competing with many other items.
Can we start this work while dredging is going on, which runs, I understand, from October to December?
That this year, I assume, this October it's starting, is that right?
I don't know, I just know the dredging
Yeah, it is.
runs from October to December.
Right. Well, we're not going to be in a position to start this study until next year. So.
No, my question was, I assume the dredging will continue next year as well.
Oh, I don't know. That's a good question. I thought this was a one and done this year.
Yeah, that's very much up in the air. There's a dispute between the town and the state about the area which is immediately in front of the harbor master's office. And there's a lot of back and forth about that. But in terms of the main harbor, which would include the south end of Chipman's Cove, I see no problem about starting anytime next year.
I originally had thought it would be a good idea to do this study before the dredging to see where we're at now, but that obviously can't happen. So that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that question. I'd like to find out if this was just going to take place this year, or if this is going to be a regular thing for just next year again, or an annual dredging. We don't dredge that regularly. When was the last time it was done? Like 12 years ago or something?
12 years ago. Well, that's what our other town warrant article is designed to deal with. And we'll come to that in a minute.
Yeah. Well, I'm all for it. I think Tom was probably right. I think it's probably a good idea to get this thing moving now instead of waiting until next spring for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think if I agree with that, once you've got the approval and you've got the money in hand and you've identified a partner, then you can spend a lot of time worrying about these details. When's the best time to start? Where do you start?
Who's going to do it?
Yeah, all of that. But
it'll take a while to figure out, right, who's going to do it and get them queued up and all that.
Yeah, so. Right. I'm pretty sure that the Board of Selectmen will say if we want to be on the December meeting, we have to go through the loan procedure, because if the town didn't have any money in June, they're not going to have it in December.
Go through the loan procedure?
There's two ways of funding it. One is the way that was used for the dredging project, which is there's $25,000 just comes out of the town budget. The other way is that the town issues a bond or gets a loan in some another way, and that has to go to an election, John. So if the Board of Selectmen approves that, and the town meeting in December approves it, then it becomes any loan that the town has to approve at an election. And I assume there's going to be an election in December, but I don't know that for sure yet.
Okay.
I think the most important thing for us to do is to approve the scope.
Well, have you sent around the final version of what the, I know I got the description of the article, but wasn't there a long, like a whole full page summary of what we wanted to do?
All I'm concerned about is the summary of the article at this point.
All right. I thought it read well. It was very concise.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's
And I've got to hop off, but I support adding the grasses and whatnot that you talked about earlier.
okay. Well, can you make that a motion? And
I make that a motion. Absolutely.
I'll second the motion. Any further discussion? This is about adding the phytoplankton and harbor grasses, and
I think that makes sense.
the concept of bottom to top.
I also wonder if we should just go for April so we don't have to get into loans with the town, but I'll let you all hash that out.
That the select board is going to be fairly clear about that. I don't have to worry about that.
Okay.
Herb, vote. Aye or nay?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Tom?
Aye.
Laura?
Yes. Aye.
And myself. Aye. So 5-0. And I'll be talking with the select. This is currently on the select board agenda for Tuesday evening, and so if those of you who wish to call in can do so.
So John, the other
Thanks,
thing.
all.
Yeah, take care,
Laura.
Laura. Thanks for your coming so soon. Tom, yes?
Well, just one thing about putting it on for December, you know, we might be able to address if there's specific areas that either the select board or members of the town or whatever are concerned about. I mean, we can address that, and if it goes down, we can revise it and bring it up again in the spring. And, you know, I hope we don't have to do that, but it's an option.
Okay. Let's see what the select board says. It's their job to have a sense of what the town is.
I also, just so that you know, I had added this to the agenda for the Shellfish Advisory Board meeting that was supposed to take place last month, but got canceled. We're having a hard time getting a quorum of the Shellfish Advisory Board. So I don't even know when our next meeting is going to be, but, you know, rest assured they will support it. And I asked them if there was any additions that they would like to see in a harbor study. You know, I mean, shellfish is going to be pretty much covered and comprehensive, but anyways, they're going to, I'm certain, lend their support to it.
That's always a big help. Okay, we now come, and I'd hoped our town purchasing agent, Rebecca Slick, could join us, but like others, she's having problem getting on board. I proposed some suggestions in the final version, which is the changes are not in the copy which is on the warrant, so I need to tell you what they are. They do not involve the substance of the request for support. They just are clarification, and one is to say that the three steps, the recovery process, the dispersion, and the pumping, forms the core of the project. I'm just trying to make sure it's clear to the people who would read this what we're asking for. And the second part, when I talk about the deliverables, I wanted to make sure that the deliverables were in two parts. One is a report on the results of looking at the three tasks. That is the recovery process, the dispersion, and the pumping. And the second part of a deliverable is a plan to outline the steps needed for the future project implementation, such as permitting, engineering plans, things like that. So these don't include, they don't affect the substance of what we propose. I think they're just trying to clarify it. If we agree and vote to support this, the next thing that happens is that the town purchasing agent would send these materials out to some potential supporters who I've identified, and we'll see what reaction we get. But we do need NRAB to vote to support the request for quotes. It's called an RFQ in the jargon. Any discussion?
John, you sent this out. I read it this morning. I think we all did get a email with the changes. I think they're fine.
Yeah, I had a chance to look at it too, John. It looks pretty straightforward.
Yes.
Okay, may I have a motion then?
Move to accept the request, the RFQ as written.
The revised and final RFQ.
Good.
Second?
Second it.
Vote, Herb?
I agree.
Tom?
Agree.
John?
Yes.
John, aye. Thank you very much. This will now go not to the select board, but it will go to the purchasing agent. She's the assistant town manager. Her name is Rebecca Slick. She's been a big help in the whole process, and she will now attach this to a whole bunch of town legal stuff, because it's a contract. This now becomes hopefully a contract between the town and a provider, and so her support has been very important.
Any relation to Gracie Slick, lead singer for Jefferson Airplane?
The only other person I know with that last name.
You young folk have the advantage of me here. I don't know who you're talking about.
Well,
Let's just say colorful.
Another vote is required now in going down the meeting agenda. Is harbor management plan. For various reasons, the Board of Selectmen's been busy with other business. Our revised and final harbor management plan has not been officially approved by the Board of Selectmen. You may have some difficulty remembering what we did, because the last time I think we touched this was back in early June.
Is it on the site already?
Is it what?
It's posted on the site already, isn't it?
No.
It's not on the town site? I thought it was.
Well, that may be. I would still like the select board to discuss and improve the final version. I need just what I think is a quick vote to approve that final version, which we approved ourselves back in June, and send it to the Board of Selectmen. I have not touched it since. So this is just, if you like, redoing a vote that we had already had. If people feel comfortable with that, I need a motion in a second.
I will make a motion to approve the final draft of the harbor management plan to be sent to the select board for approval.
I'll second that.
Vote. Tom?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
Herb?
Aye.
John, aye. Thank you very much. I had only, let's see, I had two other issues. Oh, and one of them is, which I sent out, and which now let's see if I can find it myself, a revised NRAB charter. And I've got so much paper floating around that I'm not sure. Oh, here it is. I had two concerns about the original article of for the which got NRAB started back in 1987 and was approved by town meeting. The first concern I have is it didn't include pounds. It was all about the harbor. And the second one was that it seemed to imply that NRAB was in some sense responsible for the shellfish management plan. And this goes back to the 1987 article point 2, which is the charge for this committee, talks about the continuous review and updating of the shellfish management plan and the harbor management plan. Now that seems to imply that somehow we have a responsibility for the shellfish management plan. That may have been appropriate in 1987, but I don't think it's appropriate now. And so what I'm proposing instead is that we cooperate with the Shellfish Advisory Board, the Conservation Commission, the Open Space Committee, and other town committees, which we do. But it leaves the Shellfish Advisory Board what I think is properly responsible for a shellfish management plan. And I would like to discuss this with the select board on Tuesday, not for a vote, but for their feedback.
See, this would seem to make sense just in the passage of time, the way things have evolved and the way the Shellfish Advisory Committee has developed, that it really should be their purview, if you will.
Well, I got to tell you, on the surface, it seems like a proper idea that they should be the ones. However, it's kind of like I think about the fox guarding the hen house type thing, where maybe that was the reason that it wasn't given to the Shellfish Advisory Board originally, because there's so many commercial fishermen on the Shellfish Advisory Board that are they the ones that really should be doing it? And I sit on that board, so maybe I should recuse myself from that, but it seems like maybe NRAB should have the responsibility of doing that in addition, so that's my thought. That's just another opinion about that.
I would, in discussing this with the select board, be quite happy to point out that there's more than one opinion on NRAB about how that clause 2 should be written.
Have you read the Shellfish Advisory Board's charter? Is it in there that they're responsible for it also?
I have not.
I have not either. Maybe I should look at it before our next shellfish meeting.
So John, you've raised a couple of good points. I think I'll just pull this from.
It's a question, and I think that maybe the question should be asked to the select board.
I'll make it clear when I think you're right. I'll leave it on the agenda for ask the select board to continue it, but make it clear it's a draft. We are trying to on clause 2 come up with the best wording. We have not talked to the Shellfish Advisory Board about this, which we need to do. Just see if they're willing to make any comments, or if they'd say, well, go talk to the Shellfish Advisory Board and get back to us, which might be a perfectly reasonable reply. So I think we should at least alert the select board that we're worried about it, are thinking about it. And looking at the SAB charter is a good one. Good point. I should have done that. Any other thoughts?
Pertaining to this or in general?
To this,
No.
to this general issue. I don't think we need a vote on this because we're not proposing anything definitive. This is a discussion point.
And nothing else.
So I'll just take it to the Board of Selectmen. They may say, come back when you have something definite in mind. That's fine. Let's see. So unless an objection, I'll take what we have drafted and go before the select board and see what happens. There was an interesting discussion. The last item on the agenda was a joint meeting, well, a proposal that the Rights of Public Access Committee, on which I also serve, went to the Conservation Commission. And the problem is that shell fishermen use a pathway which heads south immediately before you get to the Lieutenant Island Bridge, leads to some very productive shell fishing habitat, which is between Lieutenant Island and the Audubon property. And there's an arm of the harbor which comes in about a quarter of the way down and has begun to create a big puddle or excavation, which is clearly due to high tide overlapping this sandy path. And the consequence is that some of the shell fishermen who do wild picking can't get their trucks down there, or they get them down with great difficulty. One shellfisher person who was on the board said that it's cost the truck used about $2,000 in repairs because this is a deep hole and the truck had a problem. Conservation Commission turned down a plan to deal with this because they were saying it's a natural process for sea level rise to be driving the marsh uphill, and they didn't want to interfere in any way or set a precedent in any way to interfere with that process. And that leads to a whole bunch of shell fishing questions, because if this is a problem in one place, it's going to be a problem across the harbor. And how are the wild shellfisher population going to respond to that? It won't affect aquaculture some more. There are parts of the world where aquaculture is all done on floating buckets anyway. So it's all by boat, as in, for example, the Chesapeake. And that's also what I observed at Nauset Harbor the last time I was down there. So this is just an alert. When we talk about sea level rise, that was for me an unintended consequence. And I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. It could be a major problem for the shell fishermen. And I think John, as part of SAB, you should appreciate, you could communicate our concern, but just say that, it's going to get worse.
Well, I think that things are going to change, and instead of using trucks, you're going to be using boats to get your shellfish.
Right. So that's a subject that the Shellfish Board and the Shellfish Constable and her office need to work on. Nancy was at the meeting, so she will have heard the discussion. But I haven't discussed with her. The conclusion I have is that the Shellfish Advisory Board and the shellfish officers need to be thinking about the consequences. The NOAA chart says that things are really going to take off in 2013. Well, we only got 8 years to go. So that may sound like a lot, but it isn't.
2013?
2030. Thank you.
You got me confused for a minute.
Well, I do that. You know, the older I get, the more I get confused, or confused others. I think, John, primarily this is something that I'd appreciate your opening, making sure that was on a Shellfish Advisory Board agenda.
You're talking about specifically that Lieutenant Island access point, or
the point I wanted to make is, I mean, certainly you should have a discussion about the access point and how the Shellfish Advisory Board wants to communicate further with CONSCOM about this. Our RPAC, the Access Committee, is going to talk about it. But I think what I'm concerned about now is the larger issue. If this is a problem on Lieutenant Island, it's going to be a problem lots of places, and it's going to get worse.
Okay.
Let's see. The only other thing on our agenda is I had sent out some draft minutes for our meeting back in July 8th. I'd like to know if there are any comments on those, and if not, we need the usual vote to approve. Are there any comments? Corrections? If not, may I have a motion and a second?
Move to approve the minutes as written.
Second.
I think for this one, we can vote all at once. Aye.
Aye.
Okay, 4-0 vote. Okay, so I will be in touch with Rebecca Slick about our approved RFQ, and I'll go to the select board on Tuesday. First, ask for the approval of the harbor management plan, then ask them to approve the quarterly report, and then discuss the charter review. Those will be the 3 items. Thank you all. I'm sorry about the confusion in the startup. It means that Rebecca Slick could not join us, and she wanted to. I'll talk with Rebecca Eldridge. I think what she expects is by this time I become the manager of the process, and I guess I'm to be the host, in other words, and I'm willing to do that, but I have no idea how to go about it, so I need to learn that. Thanks all for a good meeting, and we'll be in touch.
Thanks.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Thanks, John.
Bye now.
Yeah.